We're going to be talking about the waste laboratory. We're going to be joined by Tristram, Elis and Tom Hunt in a minute. I've got a little video that I want to show you. It's not very long, but 10 years ago, and this is how far I want to show that we've come. 10 years ago, I visited a food waste recycling centre, and I was shocked to see all of it. I mean, it was like tons and tons of waste coming in every week. And really, that in 10 years, we've only managed to reduce our food waste by about 1 million tonnes, from about 8.5 million tonnes a year in the UK to 7.5 million tonnes. So we need to have more action in our food systems, and one of them is managing our food waste. So have a quick look at this video. I've recorded it off an old DVD that I had, so have a quick look at this, and then we're going to run in to speak to Tristram Stuart, who really is the waste guru. So let's run this video.
Arthur's heading for a refuse centre on the outskirts of London where food is recycled. Adam Reed is one of the country's leading experts on food waste.
Sorry, I'm just getting used to the aroma.
Oh, does it smell that bad?
You got used to it, have you?
You might want to put them on, because we're going to get our hands dirty. What you're looking at here is about 10 tonnes of mixed food waste. Most of this has come from households. There's about 800,000 piles like this laying around the UK as we speak. Every year, 8.2 million tonnes of food and drink waste generated. So you look at it like that, that's a lot of waste. And it does smell.
It doesn't take Arthur long to find supermarket food that's been thrown away before it was even opened.
Tesco stringless beans.
I've got a lettuce. It's never ending.
Why is all of this being generated as waste, though?
Well, you know, supermarkets are looking to sell. I mean, they make income through selling. So if they can get you to buy one, get one free, that encourages you to stay in the shop. You might then buy some more. The design of the aisles will encourage you to buy products you weren't expecting to buy.
So the culture that the supermarkets are happy to sell it to you because it makes them a profit?
Yes.
But you're taking it home, just throwing it away because you realise you don't need it?
Absolutely.
I need to get out of here. I think I'm going to be sick.
The centre also handles waste that's come direct from supermarkets and food shops. Their practice of keeping their shelves full leads to overstocking and waste. The result is they throw away over 350 tonnes of food a year.
Well, this is basically a supermarket produce again, but it's either not been sold, still in its packaging, past its sell-by date, or it maybe got damaged in transit, and so they've had to put it out for rubbish there and then before it even got to the supermarket shelf. I mean, some of this stuff, you could literally give it a watch and you wouldn't know that it was past its sell-by date.
2 for £3. That food waste is being driven by, you know, you get 2 for the price of 1.
Yeah, lots and lots of pallets on site, lots of tonnage.
1 tonne, 2 tonnes, 3 tonnes, 4 tonnes, 5 tonnes. There's about 200 tonnes of food waste just today alone from supermarkets. People come into people's supermarkets and say, oh, he's not as full as that. No, where are your offers? I want offers. Well, here's your offers.
Yep. You get the 2 for 1s.
Your offers are here, 200 tonnes of offers.
The amount of food thrown away by British households each year is worth a staggering £1.5 billion, and much of it is bought in supermarkets.
That truck we've just seen just dumped all of this food waste here, and that is about 10 tonnes. Somebody's not even touched. Look at these prawns, frozen prawns, all these frozen prawns under the wheel. I mean, there's really expensive food in here too. It's all being chucked away. And when people come and complain to me about me not having enough food in the bigger supermarket, I'm going to scream at them, because with those supermarkets that are they're groaning under the weight of how much food they've got in them. There are thousands of people buying too much food out of supermarkets and just chucking it away. Look at it, look how sad it is.
He's on the hunt for cheap vegetables that the supermarkets would reject.
Hi there.
Hi, Arthur. Yeah, it's good to meet you.
How you doing, man? You alright?
Very good. Very
good seeing you.
He's come to see a broccoli farmer in Kent who's in a terrible predicament.
As far as you can see on the horizon is one of our fields of broccoli. So there's about 67 acres in this field.
67 acres, massive.
Colin grew over 60 acres of broccoli for the supermarkets, but due to a spell of hot weather, they're buying more salad instead. Unable to sell it, he's left it to grow in the field.
what you see here, which is on the large side, has been left because it's just a bit too large for the specification of a main customer. And something like that, which is a beautiful bit, will go to waste.
But I mean, a field full of like this, I mean, it must be about 10 or 15% of this size.
Probably more, yeah. I would say 25, 30%, yeah. We'll have to disc it in and we'll lose it. And it's obviously...
What do you mean, disc it in?
Effectively like a plough, and plough it in.
Oh, you cut it back into the ground?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, that's a serious amount of food wasted.
And there may be blocks where we lose 100%. That's been left because it's deemed too big.
Does that mean it's worthless?
Yes.
The field is all like this?
Certainly this part of the field, there's probably 50 rows like this. So there's more than 10 tonne, Arthur. We could fill your shop up if you wanted to.
When supermarkets cancel orders, the amount of food wasted can be on an epic scale. And without a buyer, it's cheaper to plough produce back into the ground than pay to harvest it.
I tell you, I've only got about 10 feet, and that is a whole heap of wastage.
Well, they're just a quick snapshot of food waste, and we're really going to jump into this because it's a very important factor in what the food systems of the future need to look like, and how much responsibility we have as consumers, and how much pressure we can apply. And so we're very, very lucky for Tristram Stuart. Tristram, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully this hasn't kind of opened old wounds for you, because I know a long time ago the food systems were in absolute turmoil, and you managed to really take them on and give food waste a voice. But Tristram, would you like to come in here and tell us about the action that you've been taking, and how much positive change has gone on since these videos have gone out?
Yes, I will. Thank you so much, Arthur. Thanks for inviting me, and thank you for the work that you've also done over the years. Hand in fist, we've been tackling that food waste mountain. Sometimes it does feel like you're just sitting at the edge of a mountain with teaspoons, spooning at it, and saving those few broccolis that you did. Exactly my instinct as well. But to start with something a little bit hopeful, there has been a remarkable turnaround on the issue of food waste over the last 10, 20 years. When I started campaigning on the issue, there was really nothing by way of government policy, philanthropic foundation investment. Public awareness was more or less zero. Corporates were just sweeping the issue under the carpet, as it were. And that completely changed. You can't be a big food company now without saying something about your strategy to tackle food waste. We have government legislation coming out, increasingly ambitious legislation on both sides of the Atlantic, across Europe and the US, to tackle food waste. And we have the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, of which I am a UN champion, number 12.3 for the geeks, which is to halve food waste by 2030. So a lot of progress. And that's not just been hypothetical. In fact, if you look at the per capita figures in the United Kingdom, as individuals, we have cut our food waste by 1/3 since records began in 2007. And that leaves the other 2/3 still to do, of course. But it is a monumental achievement. There are very few mass behavior change environmental initiatives around the world that can claim to have achieved that level of individual behavior change. So let's celebrate the great work that has been done and the effectiveness of that work. I feel like a lot of it, and this I think bounces off what Alison was saying and what some of the comments that have been made on the chat and in the Q&A point to, which is if we can celebrate the solutions as well as tap into our anger and grief about the terrible things going on, then I think we have a good combination. We have that carrot and stick. And I like to think of this work that we're doing through the lens of my favorite word in the English language, companion or companionship, which etymologically means, well, com is the Latin for with, and pan is the Latin for bread. A companion is literally somebody you share food with. And this word pops up in so many different languages, copain in French, even in Greek, syntrophos, different etymology, but it means the same thing, eating with somebody. It's always about friendship, about partnership. And indeed, the sharing of food to build friendship, to build society, is one of those very few human cultural artifacts that are universal. Every single human society in the world uses the sharing of food as a way of building friendship, of building society. And indeed, leaving somebody out of a meal is an incredibly stigmatizing thing to do. And that works both on a domestic level, if you leave somebody off the table, but also on a geopolitical level. When we leave those nearly 1 billion people who are hungry out of the feast that the rest of us enjoy, that is bad companionship. When we waste a third of the world's food supply, that is bad companionship as well, where when we're not exercising our power, essentially, to make friends. The behavior of sharing food is indeed not just a human behavior. It's very common amongst the great apes, and indeed our closest animal relative, the bonobo, is famous for sharing food. If it has surplus food, a bonobo will proactively go and find other bonobos to share it with, and intriguingly and informatively will select a stranger in preference over a friend to share their food with. That seems counterintuitive, but essentially what those bonobos are doing is they're turning surplus food into social capital. They're making new friends. So alongside all the carbon emissions and water and land that we've wasted when we waste food, I think of it often as a waste of potential friendship. If you give your last pizza slice to the person sitting next to you, you might get a smile. Pre-COVID, you might have even got a hug. You can make friends that way, and I think that works, as I say, on a global geopolitical level as well as on a domestic and local level. So I think through that power of companionship, the power of food to bring people together, we can turn this food system from what is, to be honest, probably our biggest ecological problem. We all know that food production is the single biggest source of carbon dioxide emissions. It's by far the biggest cause of deforestation, by far the biggest user of fresh water, the main cause of soil erosion. It's the principal problem that is causing the mass species extinction event that we're right in the middle of right now. It's really going very much still in the wrong direction, and on many of these parameters actually still accelerating. The trajectory is pretty bleak when you look at it. But at the same time, we already know how to do food in a way that not just reduces those problems, but actually undoes those problems. We know how to do farming in a way that creates habitat rather than destroying it, replenishes water tables rather than depleting them, and builds soils, and at the same time sucks carbon out of the atmosphere and puts it back into the ground where it belongs, thus increasing both fertility, water retention, and of course reducing the presence of carbon in the atmosphere. I think that if we can harness the food system in these ways, we have the most powerful way of both bringing people together, motivating them around convivial meals, at the same time as undoing all the ecological harm that we've been doing. And I think right at the heart of this transformation that we see signs of all over the world, budding green shoots, springtime shoots of this transformation, right at the heart of this is this issue of food waste. Food waste has been one of the main focuses of my life for the last 10 or 20 years. I wrote a book on it, founded Feedback, and created the business Toast Ale. All of them focused on the issue of food waste. And for me, food waste's importance lies in two different directions. The first is that, of course, it is a huge problem in and of itself. And as Paul Hawken pointed out in Project Drawdown, it's one of the top 3 opportunities for reducing carbon dioxide emissions. And that finding is also backed up by McKinsey and the United Nations. Suffice to say that reducing food waste is one of the easiest ways of rapidly reducing carbon dioxide emissions. At the same time, it's one of those environmental initiatives that actually saves people money. We've heard a lot about changing diets. And one of the obstacles we often hear about there is that fruit and vegetables, fresh fruit and vegetables, are often very much more expensive than chicken nuggets. And that disincentivizes that change. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. But the issue of food waste is the price barrier isn't there. Indeed, it's a way of saving money usually by reducing food waste. And no doubt that is one of the principal ingredients of this mass behavior change that I was talking about earlier that we've seen. I think the other part of it is that the food waste movement, yourself, Arthur, and others on this call, Tom Hunt, we tapped into this, well, my motto anyway is that if you want to change the world, you've got to throw a better party than the people destroying it. And we've invited people to party after party, feast after feast around the world to transform food waste into something delicious and convivial. In my own work, of course, feeding the 5,000 events that we held in more than 50 cities around the world, launching national and regional food waste movements with all the different partners, inviting them all to this event of deep companionship and celebration of the delicious solutions. And we've seen in recent years, in the last several years, the incredibly diverse and energetic entrepreneurial initiatives around food waste. So Toast Ale is just one of hundreds of companies now that are going out and finding food that would otherwise be wasted and transforming it into chutney or juice or ice cream, or connecting people, as we're about to hear from OLIO, apps like OLIO and Too Good To Go and Karma that are matching surplus on the one hand with people that want to eat it on the other. And that's just been such a vibrant way of tapping in to the positive solution. So I think, yeah, whether you don't like the heroes and villains or not, it is good to have something you can kind of rally behind. The hero, indeed, I think Elis, who we're going to hear from, is formally speaking an OLIO food hero. And I think those things are incredibly inspiring. But the second strand that I mentioned of the importance of food waste and food waste activism, if you like, is that it isn't just about reducing food waste itself. The importance of food waste is that it is a symptom, and it's a symptom of the core hypocrisy that lies at the heart of our food system. That idea that in order to build our way out of the problems of the food system, the need that we hear from the likes of Cargill and Monsanto, and even venerable institutions like the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, this need supposedly to massively increase food production globally, to double it by 2050 or increase it by 60 or 70%, depending on who you're listening to. Now, of course, there are some parts of the world where increasing production has a very important role to play in meeting that nutrition gap. But as a global agenda, pursuing this paradigm of productionism is very manifestly a catastrophic strategy. We already have a food system that exceeds the planetary boundaries that we've heard about. And the idea of doubling it without putting in place a proper regulatory framework first to protect nature and the natural resources that we currently mine through our food system is completely insane. Indeed, it is the single biggest threat to long-term food security that there is. It's the one way we really might cook the planet before we get to protect what we actually need, which is a healthy biosphere. So that strategy is driven principally by the profit motive of large corporations. They need more profit, they need growth. That is very different from saying there is any human nutritional need. We already know that countries like the US have twice as much, more than twice as many calories on the shops and restaurant shelves as they actually need to feed that population, and 2 billion people eat too much, and in particularly of the resource-intensive foods, meat and dairy products. No, what we need to do is implement food waste reduction and diet shifts in a way that align with the planetary needs as well as the human health needs that actually are real needs, as opposed to the needs of large corporates to increase their productivity and their profit margins. So whilst they're not villains, they are machines that don't have a soul, and they'll do what those machines are designed to unless we turn them around. So how do we turn them around? We've heard a lot about consumer choice. Critical, absolutely empowering message to say that everyone chooses how to create their food system every day. They really do. We really eat the solutions or the problems on a daily basis. But we also have other powers. We have powers as citizens to pressure the corporations that are currently driving our food system. I believe that whilst we need to go out with celebration and joy and magnetize, encourage people to join our movement, we also need to stay in touch with our anger and our grief. And if there are corporations that are acting in an egregious and harmful way, exposing that and thereby leveraging the power of reputational harm is an incredibly effective way of getting those machines to internalize the costs that are currently externalized, the pollution and the environmental harm and the social harm that they do. That is a perfectly legitimate and very, very powerful way for citizens to act, and has proven, indeed, if you look at how the supermarkets in the UK have raced to be the least wasteful, have raced towards transparent food waste reporting, have encouraged government to go further, that has been partly because of their public image, the brand that they all depend on to survive in the market that is demanding social and environmental change. And finally, of course, as citizens, we have the power to affect government. And without government, without regulation, without legislation, both on a national and very importantly, international level, I believe all of these individual choices and changes that we make will be insufficient to create the total social, environmental transformation that is actually required to avert the ecological catastrophe we are on the brink of. The kind of government action that I'm talking about is, of course, the specific laws that tackle specific problems like food waste. We've seen a few good food waste laws come out. The UK government was actually due to have a consultation, postponed owing to COVID, on mandatory transparent food waste reporting from big food companies, an incredibly useful piece of legislation that would really make it much easier for entrepreneurs, NGOs and others to tackle the problem of food waste. Very, very good, specific piece of legislation. We've had the Groceries Code Adjudicator Act passed in 2013, which, let's do our maths, yes, was passed after Arthur went to that broccoli farm. It is now illegal, owing to the Groceries Code Adjudicator Act, for a supermarket to cancel an order to a farmer, to any producer, with the result that they waste food and incur a cost as a result. That is now illegal, and breaking that law in the United Kingdom, if you're a big supermarket, can incur fines of up to 1% of your turnover, which is a massive fine potential, plus all the reputational harm that would go with that. So that's kind of legislation that's really, really useful. But we also need to look beyond those specific tweaks. We need to look at the system. First and foremost among those, of course, farm subsidies. $700 billion of government money around the world are spent every year on subsidizing farm production. I think a lot of that is a good idea, but only 1% currently is spent on ecological farm subsidies, so supporting farmers to do better environmental farming. That is and do not exaggerate it, the single biggest missed opportunity in public policy today. If we can switch that and make 99% of farm subsidies linked to environmental performance, linked to sequestering carbon in soils, creating habitat, better watershed management, then we have a massive opportunity to transform our food system. And that starts with us, but it goes all the way up to the top. And as I say, I like to think of the word companion, the lens for bringing us together around these shared goals, this metaphorical feast that we can envisage. I think that is a real opportunity for hope, for delicious parties. I can't wait till the end of lockdown. We can all get together and practice real companionship a la bonobo. Arthur, I hope you're cooking. Thank you very much.
Tristram, wow, unbelievable. The way that you're able to just tell us these stories and paint these pictures is just fantastic. I love this idea of surplus food being social capital. Just so good, so good. And Tristram, what's really good is as you're talking and making things so apparently obvious, the chat freezes, no Q&As coming in, everybody really paying attention. And for anybody who's listening in, probably saying, oh, you know what, I really want to listen to that again. We've recorded this and we'll get it out to people. So please tune in.
Have I got a minute to answer a couple of these? I've just looked at the Q&A.
Yes, please do. We're leaning a little bit time heavy, but Tristram, it would be good for you to see anything that you'd like to say. I didn't really see anything because everyone went quiet while you were talking. Maybe what we can do, if anyone wants to ask Tristram a specific question, can you drop it into the Q&A, which is the bottom of the screen?
There's one, Arthur, that I want to answer.
Please do.
It means me moving around. Sorry for this slightly impromptu thing. I'm not just foregrounding all my vegetables. These are growing in my dining room. But I want to show you this. Somebody's asked a question about the future ELMs, right? The environmental land management. Which is the new subsidies that are going to hopefully come in, will come in, we'll yet to see the detail, for the United Kingdom. And that is basically about land management on a landscape scale, so not individual farmers. I have what you just saw, I just showed you a picture of. I live in the middle of the Ashdown Forest. I have my own, one of my lockdown projects has been to get a herd of cows. We've always done conservation grazing on the heathland that maintains the habitat. Just the other day, I saw a hen harrier hunting over the heathland that I just showed you. We're reintroducing water voles this year, possibly beavers in the future. We've got incredible bird life and animal life. And it thrives because of the interaction of traditional farming with the landscape. And I've spoken to all the neighbours of all the land that you could just see, both the forest in the near, the fields, the heathland beyond, and everyone is stoked to do a collaborative conservation grazing, reintroduction, wild food production system in a joined up way, and that's exactly what the ELMs are designed to encourage. We're going to do it anyway. I'm going to put collars on my cows that allows me to draw a map. Which creates an invisible electric fence, essentially. And then we don't even have to use fences. We can have an open landscape, conservation graze. And I think absolutely this is the kind of direction we can take farming in. And it relies on people demanding that stuff. So yeah, I think it's a very exciting meeting of government policy and consumer power.
Yeah, future-proofing farming is one of the essential points of this future food system, isn't it? And as chefs and everybody involved in food, understanding what you're talking about, Tristram, is essential. Thank you so much for your leadership. And, I see all the points here. Thank you. Everything you're saying is upheld. This is such an amazing talk. So loads of positivity, Tristram. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to keep moving. Again, any Q&A questions, please, Tristram, if you'd like to answer anything, it's in the Q&A or down on the chat. Paul, did you want to say anything before we move on?
No, I was just going to say there is a couple of questions specifically for you, Tristan, in the chat. So maybe if you can type away in there as we continue on for a little bit, that would be great. But awesome contribution, and thank you so much for sharing with us. I mean, this is really key in 2021 for us to move this forward, and there's so many fronts that we're working on. So thanks, Arthur. Really
positive. Okay, we're going to move on. We're still talking about food waste. Elis, if you'd like to lift up your video and unmute yourself, we're going to talk to OLIO, and give us a few tips on preventing food waste. After OLIO, we'll be moving to Tom Hunt and some of his delicious food waste hacks.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So just briefly who I am. So my name is Elis. I live in Jersey. I come from the Czech Republic, and I've been living on the Channel Islands for the last 7 years. And as don't know how many other people, but I just saw the food waste problem always around when I lived in the UK and then moved to Jersey, and nobody was talking about it. It was really 4 years back. Not mentioned much at all, but it was really bothering me, and I was determined to find a solution. Started talking to supermarkets, and just there was not very easy one anywhere around. And as you do when you are determined to make a difference, you bump into solutions, they just come to you. So I found OLIO online and I thought it was magic, gave them a quick call, and they said, well, give it a go, see how it goes. And since then, in a month, 2 month time, we were doing amazing things in Jersey. I got employed by OLIO a year after, started as a volunteer, as Tristram well remembered. So everybody who sees a problem can really make a difference, but it takes a lot of us, of course, to do that. So I did create a very strong food sharing community in Jersey. Then we recreated the great success in Guernsey, and I also then traveled in 2019 to Stockholm. So OLIO's got now food sharing communities across 55 countries, but the base and where OLIO was born is still the UK, but I'll mention that later. Next slide, please. So just to give a little bit of a background, we've mentioned, food waste happens across the whole supply chain, but shockingly, and not many people still realize, globally about 50%, but in the UK, shocking 70% of the food waste problem happens in our homes. So households are the main problem, and out of that, 75% of all that food is still perfectly edible. So there is a clear opportunity and real need for improvement, and I don't want us to all feel guilty or depressed about these facts, but to really more like inspire action and give a real food for thought, because we can look at this in a very different way. If we are such a big part of the problem, we are also equally such an enormous part of the solution. It's a little bit like looking at the glass. Is it half empty or half full? And this is really the core idea behind OLIO. Next slide, please. So we've all heard a lot about last 12 months, and it's been such a challenging year. But interestingly enough, it was exciting to see the data then when they go out that food waste levels dropped really significantly at the beginning of lockdown. We've been busier than ever with food sharing and all the work we've been doing. There was a massive peak for, you probably all know about, restaurants and cafes or other places when they had to shut down. There was a peak of food waste. Everything stopped and we were busy ourselves trying to redistribute all that food. But on the other side and household level, there were some real incredible positive behavioral changes. So we probably all feel like that. We've all done it. We cooked more creatively during the last 12 months, and many of us used leftovers much better than before. Apparently, lots more people were aware what they need and checked cupboards much more regularly and better before going shopping. I didn't want to go and queue at the supermarket when I didn't need to. And lots of people said that they've been managing food better, looking what's in their fridge and using freezers much more than before. What I've seen, at least our end, is that people started growing their own food, and there was a fear for food security, and we were all locked at home. So people were using their gardens and thinking outside of the box. And I've been growing for a long time. I come from the family of growers and gardeners, but people who never done it before got inspired and got a little cherry tomatoes on their windowsill and herbs. And why I'm mentioning this is sort of, that's where I come from with my the interest, long-term interest and confusion about food waste, because when you grow food, you have this connection, and as Alison mentioned before, there's this emotional investment, putting the seed in the ground, watching it grow, looking after the food. So I think that these are such positive changes that we have seen, that people treat food and value it better rather than buying it very cheaply, often in supermarkets where it's often looked at as a commodity. So all these things really leading consequently to less food waste. Next slide, please. So for those who have never heard about OLIO, so we are a neighbor-to-neighbor food sharing app. We wanted to give people and individuals a tool to share surplus food. So it connects people with each other, so surplus food and non-food as well can be shared rather than thrown away. We've shared via OLIO sort of over 15 million items across about 55 countries. UK is the strongest community and where OLIO was born, but Channel Islands, Sweden, Mexico, Singapore, it only takes one person to, again, stand up, look around in their community and want to make a difference. And this tool is so simple to use. So people just snap a picture of their food and other people can request it, message directly to the person and arrange a pickup. Of course, now no nice meeting people at the door, but sort of all safe, non-contact pickup during these challenging times. The mission of OLIO is really to help create hyperlocal food sharing communities, and we have a very ambitious mission. We would like to have 1 billion users in 10 years' time to really create these little behavioral changes and make food sharing kind of a norm. Next slide, please. So we tackle not just household food waste, but also we work with businesses. We've made the app look as simple as fun as possible, so it's easy for people to do so. There's badges, we calculate impact, people can see how many neighbors they've shared with, how much water that's saved, how much CO2, so people really love to see their impact. And we all find ourselves with food waste, if we like it or not. And yeah, as the first slides said, that most of it is edible, but there's just not normally easy way to give it to someone else. In the big cities, we don't know our neighbors. You won't just knock on the door and offer these days food to someone. So this is literally what makes it easier. After parties or when people grow food, moving houses, we work with Airbnb to again provide a simple solution to give it to someone who might really need it, because one not positive part of the lockdown is that there is an increased food poverty in the UK and elsewhere. So there is many people who will really appreciate it. So there is environmental side of what we do as well as social side. The amount of messages and tears I've had, single moms thanking me that they didn't have time to, they didn't have money to get fresh fruit and vegetables for their children, and their neighbors had some spare, and kind of it's really give and take, really positive side of things we do. And we work with retailers, so we have a food waste hero program which enables volunteers collect food from the supermarkets. We work with Tesco and others, and cafes such as Pret or Planet Organic, and again bring it to their home and put it on the app and share it with everyone near them. Next slide, please. And apart from being the tech tool and being the app as we are, the big part of all the work we and other food waste fighters doing is, of course, is the awareness and sharing the single and the most easiest tips, what everybody can do at home, how to even prevent having food they need to give away. Couple of weeks ago, you probably all heard about Food Waste Action Week campaign, which was the first ever one organized by REP in the UK. So there is a lot of momentum going on, and people are aware that food waste is a huge problem, but there is still lots of things that can be improved. So date labels, food labeling is very confusing for many people. We keep sharing about it, and still there is a huge confusion about what use by date means, what best before date means. So use by date is relating just to, well, mainly to food safety, so that food cannot be shared past the date. But then plenty of food that's been normally binned in the supermarkets or even in households is just got a best before date, and people worry what it means, but it's really just relating to food quality. So one thing everybody should really do is to just get familiar with these labels and not worry about best before dates. Then using up leftovers is the number 2, probably most important thing, and I'm sure there are chefs who will be mentioning some creative ideas and recipes talking after me, but we've all gone more creative, I think, in the last 12 months, and with the power of Google, or if you find yourself with cream and pineapple in your fridge and you have no idea what to do with it, all you need to do is to put it in Google and you will find thousands and thousands of things to try and create. Correct food storage, still, there is lots of confusion how to store food. Bananas, potatoes, of course, not going to the fridge, and so on. So we constantly share these tips. And freezing more, I still believe people haven't really befriended their freezers as much as they could, and still seem to be very surprised that you can really safely freeze milk and cheese and other things. So these are just the little things we all can do to prevent food waste before we need to, find someone to give it to and share it via OLIO or other tools. Next slide, please. This is just one of my favorite quotes, and there is many. But yeah, global food system is really one big puzzle, and we citizens we play a big part, being part of the problem, but as well as being a huge part of the solution. And we have managed to mobilize communities to make a huge difference with others, of course, other tools and other food waste fighters and other organizations that create products from food waste. And it's really about bottom-up approach, as well as we, of course, need changes in policies. And it would be great to have one labeling food system across Europe. But individuals can make a difference, and we've empowered them, as well as retailers, to take simple and positive fun action sort of via using the app and other little things. And that gives us hope. We see the impact continuously growing. So when somebody says, oh, it's just me and it's just one bread and one milk, well, it's times billions, and it really then comes to the fact that the majority of the food waste problem is ourselves, really, the households. Next slide, please. And I just want to say thank you, and keep doing the great work you guys all doing. And we need to work collaboratively, like food waste. We can't solve the supply chain, start of the supply chain, fuel surplus, others focusing on that. And then if we work together, we can really cover the whole circle and make a big difference for the future. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Elis. Brilliant solutions and the opportunities to put your piece of the jigsaw puzzle into this global conundrum of food waste. Thank you, Elis. And lots of really positive feedback on OLIO down in the chat box, and also there's some questions in the Q&A. Elis, if you could jump into the Q&A to ask anybody, people in South Africa on OLIO solutions. So please dial in there. Right, we need to keep moving. We've got so much content. Tom Hunt, hi Chef Tom. You're going to introduce yourself and your video. But Tom, it's so great for you to join us. The London Action Hub kind of reaching out globally, but also to chefs local to the Action Hub in the UK. Tom, could you introduce yourself a little bit and the video you put together for this waste laboratory?
Yeah, sure. Hi. What an incredible hour and a half of talk so far. I mean, I'm incredibly inspired. I'm going to dip more into the practical side of things now. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a whole food chef, focusing on, well, really not just zero waste, but the solutions to our food system. And I'm also a Guardian columnist, the Chef's Manifesto podcast host, and author of Eating for Pleasure, People and Planet, my latest book. So I started working in food waste in 2011 when Tristram Stuart invited me to do a food waste banquet. Now, this was a life-changing moment for me. I completely changed my career. I called myself an eco-chef. I know we're not supposed to have heroes, but it felt like a good title, and it certainly helped kind of define my career and turn it into, well, helped me prioritize the environment within my own cooking. So the event that I cooked kind of with Tristram inspired me to develop and coin a term which I call root to fruit eating. It's a zero waste philosophy that celebrates the solutions to our food system. But I quickly realized that food waste was the tip of the iceberg. And so I expanded root to fruit eating to be a kind of holistic food system philosophy and practical manifesto to help eaters and chefs shop, cook and eat for pleasure, people and planet, in line with sustainability kind of business principles. And okay, so the internet isn't great, so I've decided to pre-record a video. I'm hoping it will play totally fine. It's all very lo-fi, but I hope you enjoy it. I show you a few of my zero waste cooking techniques, including these chips, the ultimate bar snack, made with leftover kale and cauliflower leaves and things like that. I've also got, these are actually the roots from leeks, and they're an incredible thing that you would normally waste, but they taste brilliant and they look amazing and incredible. I also do a kind of zero waste chimichurri with lots of different greens and things like that. And so, yeah, I mean, root to fruit eating is about taking an holistic approach to our food that connects the dots between us, our food and nature. So I'm going to be here online throughout the video to answer any questions. So please pop them in the chat box. And also, I'd love to hear your zero waste tips. So let's have a bit of a conversation while the video is playing.
I'm at Broccoli Market to do my weekly shop with Lyra and Kombu. And I thought it would be good to show you some of the whole produce that's available at a farmer's market or direct when you're shopping direct from the farm, because really that's where you're going to find most of your whole ingredients, like those carrots I can see behind us. So let's go and check them out. So here we've got some beautiful huge bunches of carrots with their green tops on, which obviously is an indication of their freshness. The tops of a root vegetable perish very quickly, especially on a beetroot, and so you know when you've got a top that it's super fresh. So let's get some of those, and a bunch of beetroot because the leaves are incredible. Loads of recipes we can make with them. And this stall in particular I love for their celery. Look at that. Isn't that incredible? All those beautiful leaves and those tops that would normally get lopped off. Check out these cauliflowers. Hey, look at these, Lyra. Aren't they incredible? I mean, the leaves on that you wouldn't find anywhere else. I'm at Wild Country Organics now, and they've got some gnarly leeks with these kind of muddy roots. Again, keeping this really fresh. They have lopped off the very tops, which are edible, which is a shame. But even these little tendrils are edible. And deep fried and crispy, they're quite an interesting kind of oniony topping to a dish. So I'm back home now, and I wanted to show you our garden. We're growing some vegetables. These are all left over from last year. They've survived the winter, and a lot of them though are starting to shoot, so they all need using. Or of course we can let them go to flower, which is going to help produce seeds and feed the bees and so on and so forth. We try and keep to permaculture principles within the garden, however, whenever we can. We just put in a pond actually back there, which is full of frog spawn. Exciting. The frogs of course will help eat the slugs. So here I've got some Alexander and some fennel. This has survived the snow, which is incredible. So I'm going to add those to our chimichurri. I'm going to make a carrot top chimichurri. The Alexanders are a really pungent, aromatic, and wonderful herb. The stalks are great added to stews or even candied, but I'm just going to use a few of the leaves. Then we've got this lovely charred Romanesco, which unfortunately has started to sprout, so I'm going to have to use that up, and some of the leaves, which of course you don't really get unless you grow them yourself, but they're totally scrumptious and can be eaten like any hardy green. Then we've got sprouting broccoli, which is just all kind of going to flower now, which is perfectly fine. It's going to help feed the bees. And then the same's happening to our kale, our red Russian kale. So I'll try and use a few of these tops, maybe in the main dish I'm going to cook. Okay, so I'm home with this wonderful produce that I've bought from the market. Our wonderful cauliflower with all its leaves, beetroot, again, intact with its leaves, which really is kind of, for me, a big part of zero waste cooking, which I call root to fruit, meaning really that we're using the whole ingredient, all the way from the roots, all the way to the top. The fruits, the flowers, the stem, everything in between. So what I want to make for you now is a couple of different things to show you or describe some different zero waste techniques. We've got our whole bunch of celery. Now, I'm going to make a type of chimichurri, or green sauce. Green sauce is a great way to use up an abundance of different types of leaves and greens, and of course there's so many different types of green sauce that you can make. They'll all work with these different greens, even the carrot tops, although I would say carrot tops are a very kind of bitter herb. In our restaurant Poco, we use them as a garnish because they've got these kind of beautiful chervil-like leaves, but I'll also whiz them up into a green sauce. I'm going to make a chimichurri with these Alexanders and fennel, as well as the carrot tops and celery leaves. But I've also got some red Russian kale, which has started sprouting. I've cut all of the tops off to stunt it and hope that they start to bush out again. But I've also got some Romanesco leaves here as well. So I'm going to make some crisps, a bit like kale chips, actually, from the celery leaves and all of these, because it's a great way, if you've got an abundance of these, to cook them down into something that's really quite delicious and that will last a long time. But first, let's make the chimichurri. We're going to include all of the stalks, and I'll show you how to use them. Cooking with the stalks, or learning to cook with the stalks of different greens and vegetables, is really important, because they're something that tends to get thrown out by almost everyone, but they're the majority of an ingredient. Like if you're purchasing a bunch of parsley or coriander or anything, then if you spend time picking all the leaves off and then throwing away the stalks, you're throwing away 70% of that product, which is just crazy. And I mean, putting it in stock's one thing, but really all you're doing is extracting a bit of the flavour and nutrients. You're still disposing of all that fibre, which is something that's truly lacking in the modern diet, in really what I would say is an over-processed diet that most of us across the world now tend to consume. So putting back that fibre through eating from root to fruit, consuming the stalks and skin and everything else is really part of this whole discussion that we're having about replacing lost nutrition, and doing that in a really cost-effective way. So I'm going to just take a few of these carrot tops. Now, one thing I would say is only use about 50% carrot tops in a dish, unless you really want something that's very bitter. So carrot tops, again, celery leaves are similar. They tend to be quite bitter.
or the outer ones do, but still really aromatic. They're intensely aromatic, actually, and so they need to be used in moderation. I also like to make celery leaves into crisps as well. So I'll put a couple in with the cauliflower leaves to make into crisps, and then we'll also use some in the chimichurri too. The inner leaves, the light green leaves, tend to be a bit sweeter, and I love to use them in salads and things like that. And the butt of the celery is also great to use. The very end, of course, where it was cut, might be a bit soily, but that can just be trimmed off carefully. I think too often when it comes to preparing vegetables, we tend just to lop things off. So we might just cut that whole big block of celery off and compost it or throw it away. Whereas if you just cut it with a little bit more care, you can just trim the very end off. And so this really is all that needs to be composted when it comes to our whole bunch of celery. The celery butt could be sliced very finely and used like fennel. It's kind of similar really to a fennel bulb, and could be braised or finely sliced and pickled, or simply eaten raw like a crudité. Okay, so we've got our bunch of herbs. Rather than spend time picking all of these off, I'm going to prepare them in a different way, and you can use this technique with any bunch of herbs, parsley, whatever, huge bunch of parsley. You just place it on your chopping board, and then we're going to finely chop it, starting at the kind of stalky end. If something's really super fibrous, I would compost it, but if it can be cut finely and become refined and delicious and nice to eat, then it will just add texture and bulk to our green sauce. So I'm going to just finely chop from the bottom. Now really finely to start with, because these more fibrous stalks need to be cut across the grain so that they are no longer fibrous. Those longer fibers that would otherwise get stuck in our teeth or just really be unpleasant to eat suddenly become very palatable and add texture and deliciousness to our final dish rather than taking it away. Now, when you've finely chopped past the more fibrous bits, you can chop the leaves as roughly as you'd like. And now I'd say this technique with herbs saves a huge amount of time. I mean, I don't know how long as a chef I've spent picking parsley for events and things like that, but this is a much, much quicker way to do it, and arguably is refined enough to use in any which way, in any, you know, even in a very kind of refined and smart fine dining restaurant, you could use this technique. One saved jar. Herbs can go in. When I was starting out cooking, I went on some travels around Central America and ended up working in an Argentinian grill where we made a lot of chimichurri. The main thing sold on the menu was steak and chimichurri. Chimichurri is an Argentinian style green sauce, usually made with red wine vinegar, a bit of chili and mostly parsley, maybe a bit of dried oregano and olive oil. So of course this is a slightly off-the-wall version, but it's going to be very delicious and aromatic. So there's our herbs in our jar. I'm just going to muddle them down just to start bruising them. I'm going to add a bit of garlic as well. I'm just going to very carefully trim the very base of the garlic off. Remove the leaves, the skin. Now this skin can be used in stock, or you can cook it down with onion skins to make a delicious kind of bitter powder. I might have some here actually, which we can put on our final dish. So this is onion skin powder. Powders are a friend of the zero waste chef. Beetroot skins, things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to eat because they really are just too fibrous, you can cook down and make into these interesting powders to decorate your dishes. So I was quite surprised when I made this because it actually does taste delicious. Onion skins. I mean, to me that's slightly crazy. I didn't imagine that they could be that tasty. So I'll put them to one side and then just crush our garlic and chop it as finely as you like. I don't mind a bit of chunky garlic, so I'm going to just kind of roughly chop it and then add it in. Okay, so to finish this off, I am going to add a bit of oregano. Dried oregano, fresh would do too, of course. Some chili flakes to taste. We don't want it to be blow your head off hot, just put a nice little bit of heat. Some red flecks through the sauce is going to be delicious. I haven't got any red wine vinegar, so I'm going to use this Chardonnay vinegar, which is absolutely delicious and makes one of my favourite dressings. I have got some kombucha vinegar here, and which I probably should be using, and some cider vinegar made with apple scraps. But I'm going to go for this scrumptious white wine vinegar. I'm going to go about 50-50, so half vinegar, half olive oil. Now, you can eat this immediately, but it's actually really good the next day. And there we have a huge pot of green sauce, which is going to last in the fridge for about a week. Delicious. So now I'm going to do our cauliflower leaf crisps. Let me just cut this whole bunch of leaves off. Now, if you're on a farm, it's incredible how many leaves are actually on a cauliflower. It's much more than even this. Kind of huge amount of leaves, which they cut off on the farm and allow to get tilled back into the soil or just kind of rot back into the soil, which is a great way of adding nutrition back into the earth. This poor little cauliflower doesn't look too happy, unfortunately, so some of that might have to go in the compost, but today I'm after the leaves anyway. And then I will chop these off. Let's take them all. Now, again, the stem in there is perfectly delicious and wonderful eaten. A cauliflower leaf has this kind of thick, fibrous stem that, like any fibrous stem, needs to be cut across the grain in order to make it more edible and delicious. The top part is fine as it is, and we can just rub some oil into that and get that roasting into a nice crisp. But this thicker rib is nice, finely sliced. Again, just kind of 5mm to 10mm, just so they're nice and short and cut across the grain, so you can get your teeth on them. So give me a minute, I'll just prepare these. Again, I'm going to prepare the celery and the kale, and when I've done that, I'll come back to you and show you how to turn it into a delicious crisp. Okay, so here we have our cauliflower leaves, sprouted kale, romanesco leaves, celery leaves, and everything. Now I'm going to turn these all into some delicious crisps. Oven's on at 150 degrees centigrade. to be honest, any temperature works. So it just means that it will cook slightly quicker and be crispier. And I'm going to pop our leaves onto the board here. I might actually need 2 boards because there's so many leaves, but they'll shrink down as they cook. I'm going to pop the chopped stems on here as well, and then I'm going to give it a good glug of olive oil and then some honey or maple syrup. Let's keep it vegan. So olive oil, maple syrup, salt. Now undersalt this to start with because they're going to shrink so much. You might find that you add too much salt in the end. And now I'm just going to kind of scrunch these together and make sure all of the maple syrup and olive oil is in our leaves, massaged into the leaves and the stems. And then I'm going to split this between two trays and pop it in the oven and then cook it. I've got the oven, as I said, at 150, and leave it for about 15-20 minutes, and then I'm sure they'll start to get crispy. And as soon as they're completely dry and crispy, I'll start pulling them out of the oven. The ones around the edge will be cooked first, so I might take some out and then put the tray back in. Whilst they're cooking, I just want to share with you the leek that I bought. Now, it's hard to find leeks with the roots on, but the roots are also totally delicious. They taste similar to the onion powder actually once they're fried, but if you give them a good wash and deep fry them, you end up with a really oniony, kind of crispy tendril, which is very interesting to garnish a dish with. So I'm going to fry some of that and add it to the beetroot leaf biryani on top as a little garnish. Also, the dark green tops of leeks are totally fine to use just as you might the white, especially if you're going to put it into a soup or something. Again, same story, slightly more fibrous, which is why we've kind of eradicated these things from our diets, because we like this slightly over-processed, kind of refined diet of white flour and things like this nowadays, whereas it's these kind of fibrous extremities of the fruit and vegetables that we need to eat more of in order to improve our nutrition, especially at zero cost. Actually, they work really well as crispy little treats as well. So I'm going to finally shred a few of those, and I'm going to deep fry both them and the roots to use as a kind of final topping for the beetroot leaf biryani. And so here's the crisps, the cauliflower crisps, the Romanesco crisps and kale tops and things like that. And they are just one of the nicest things to eat. I could eat a whole bowl like this of them. It's a great way to cook down a load of surplus produce and make it into something extremely delicious and perfect for garnishing dishes too.
That's fantastic, Tom, and I think it really works. The fact that, you know, recording a video and then being able to comment over the top of it is just brilliant. So Tom, thank you so much for that. We're racing through the day. Everybody, thank you so much for the chat and the Q&A. We're trying to answer as many of your questions as possible. But that is the end of our waste laboratory. Thank you to Tristram Stuart, inspirational. Thank you for Elis for sharing OLIO's brilliant work. And to Tom Hunt, thank you so much for doing all that you do. It's funny how, you know, one hero is another person's hero, is someone else's hero. Great to hear that you changed your direction, having worked with Tristram in the past. So just brilliant how everyone influences everyone. It's real companionship, as Tristram has said.